What happens when a tattooed woman walks into the most elite military training facility in the world? Most people see ink and make assumptions, but sometimes those permanent marks tell stories that can silence a room full of hardened warriors and change everything you thought you knew about strength, sacrifice, and what it really means to serve. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado, California. The familiar sound of boots hitting pavement echoed through the compound as another class of hopeful candidates prepared for what many considered the most grueling military training in the world. Among the sea of nervous faces and perfectly pressed uniforms stood Sarah Chun, her black hair pulled back in regulation style, her posture straight and confident despite the whispers that followed her wherever she went. The whispers weren't about her small stature or her gender, though those certainly drew attention in the male-dominated world of Navy SEAL training. The whispers were about the intricate tattoo that covered most of her left forearm, visible even beneath the rolled sleeves of her training uniform. The design was unlike anything most of the other candidates had seen, a complex pattern of interwoven symbols that seemed to tell a story all their own. "Look at the artwork on the new girl," muttered Jake Morrison, a tall candidate from Texas whose own arms bore the typical military tattoos of eagles and anchors. "Probably some trendy design she got at a strip mall. Wonder how long she'll last before she rings out." Several other candidates snickered in agreement. The dropout rate for SEAL training hovered around 80%, and they all assumed they knew who would be among the first to quit. Sarah heard the comments, but kept her eyes forward, focusing on the imposing figure approaching the formation. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez had been an instructor at the training center for over a decade. His weathered face and steel-gray eyes had seen hundreds of candidates come and go, and he prided himself on being able to spot the quitters within the first week. As he walked down the line inspecting the new class, his gaze lingered on Sarah's tattoo for a moment longer than the others, but his expression remained unreadable. "Welcome to basic underwater demolition SEAL training," Rodriguez barked, his voice carrying across the formation. "For the next several months, we're going to push you beyond what you think are your limits. We're going to break you down and see what you're really made of. Some of you think you know what pain is. You're wrong. Some of you think you understand sacrifice. You have no idea." The chief continued his inspection, stopping occasionally to correct a uniform discrepancy or bark a question at a nervous candidate. When he reached Sarah, he paused again, his eyes drawn once more to the detailed artwork on her arm. "Interesting ink, candidate," he said, his tone neutral but probing. "Care to explain the significance?" Sarah's voice was steady as she replied, "It's personal, Chief, but it reminds me why I'm here." Rodriguez studied her for another moment before moving on. "We'll see how personal motivation holds up when you're hypothermic and covered in sand." The first week of training was a blur of physical conditioning, classroom instruction, and psychological pressure designed to weed out those who lacked the mental fortitude to continue. Sarah threw herself into every challenge with quiet determination, never complaining when the instructors singled her out for extra attention, never flinching when her fellow candidates made snide remarks about her chances of success. During a particularly brutal session of log carries on the beach, Jake Morrison found himself struggling to keep up with Sarah's relentless pace. His earlier confidence had begun to waver as he watched her consistently outperform many of the larger, supposedly stronger candidates. "How's she do it?" gasped Tommy Walsh, another candidate from Morrison's home state. "She's half my size, but she's carrying that log like it weighs nothing." Morrison wiped sweat from his eyes and glared at Sarah's back as she continued down the beach without showing signs of fatigue. "Probably juiced up on something. No way someone that small has that kind of endurance naturally." But the other candidates were beginning to notice something else about Sarah. During team exercises, she never left anyone behind. When Walsh twisted his ankle during a beach run and started to fall back from a group, it was Sarah who doubled back to help him keep up, despite the risk of earning punishment for breaking formation. When another candidate struggled with knot tying exercises during underwater training, She quietly showed him the proper technique during a break, even though helping others was technically against the competitive nature of the program. The instructors noticed too. Master Chief Sullivan, the senior instructor for the program, had been watching Sarah's performance with growing interest. Unlike many candidates who try to stand out through bravado or attention-seeking behavior, Sarah simply did the work. She excelled in areas that surprised the instructors, particularly in tactical planning and problem-solving exercises that required quick thinking under pressure. "She's got something," Sullivan mentioned to Rodriguez during one of their evening debriefings. "Not sure what it is yet, but she's different from the usual crowd." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "That tattoo of hers, I keep thinking I've seen something like it before. Can't place where, though." As the weeks progressed, the training intensified. Hell Week loomed on the horizon, the infamous 5 in, a half-day ordeal that would test every candidate's physical and mental limits. Sleep deprivation, constant physical activity, and psychological pressure would push the remaining candidates to their breaking point. Many would ring the bell, officially withdrawing from the program and ending their dreams of becoming a Navy SEAL. Sarah continued to excel, but the comments about her tattoo persisted. Some candidates had begun making increasingly creative stories about what they thought the symbols meant, ranging from gang affiliations to New Age spiritual nonsense. The speculation became a source of entertainment during the brief moments of downtime between training evolutions. "I'm telling you, it's some kind of feminine empowerment thing," insisted Morrison during a meal break. "Probably got it after reading some self-help book about finding your inner warrior or whatever." "Could be worse," added Walsh, who had begun to develop a grudging respect for Sarah after she'd helped him through several difficult training evolutions. "At least it's not a butterfly or something equally stupid." Sarah ignored the speculation, just as she ignored most of the commentary about her presence in the program. She had learned long ago that people would always have opinions about her choices, and she had more important things to focus on than their uninformed assumptions. What none of the candidates knew was that Sarah's background was unlike any of theirs. While they had come to SEAL training from various military occupational specialties or straight from civilian life, Sarah carried experiences that none of them could imagine. The tattoo on her arm was indeed personal, more personal than any of them realized, and its significance went far beyond anything they could have guessed. During weapons training, Sarah's proficiency with various firearms raised eyebrows among the instructors. While all candidates received basic weapons training before arriving at the program, Sarah's accuracy and handling suggested far more experience than her military record indicated. She could field strip and reassemble weapons with the kind of muscle memory that only came from extensive use, and her shooting scores consistently ranked among the top in the class. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" asked Instructor Peterson after Sarah had once again achieved perfect scores during a challenging marksmanship exercise. "My father taught me when I was young," Sarah replied simply, which was technically true, but far from the complete answer. Peterson studied her for a moment, noting the way she held herself, the confidence in her movements that went beyond mere physical training. "Your father military?" "Something like that," Sarah answered, her tone indicating the conversation was over. The instructor didn't press further, but he made a mental note to look more closely at Sarah's background file. There were pieces missing from the puzzle, details that didn't quite add up with the straightforward narrative of a young sailor seeking to become a SEAL. As Hell Week approached, tensions among the candidates increased. The psychological pressure was intentional, designed to simulate the stress of actual combat operations where clear thinking under extreme duress could mean the difference between life and death. Some candidates began to crack under the strain, their performance deteriorating as they struggled with sleep deprivation and constant physical demands. Sarah remained steady, her performance consistent regardless of the challenges thrown at her. She had a way of compartmentalizing stress that impressed even the veteran instructors, maintaining focus on immediate tasks while keeping sight of larger objectives. It was a skill that couldn't be taught in any classroom, something that came from experience with real pressure in real situations. The night before Hell Week was scheduled to begin, Master Chief Sullivan found himself studying the personnel files of the remaining candidates. Sarah's file was notably thin compared to others, containing the basic information required for security clearance, but lacking the kind of detail that usually accompanied someone with her apparent skill set. Born in San Francisco to parents listed simply as deceased. Raised by her grandmother until age 16. Enlisted in the Navy at 18 after completing high school. Assigned to various support roles before requesting transfer to combat training. The information was accurate but incomplete, telling a story while revealing almost nothing about the person behind the facts. Sullivan set the file aside and made a decision to dig deeper. Something about Sarah Chun didn't add up, and his instincts were telling him there was much more to her story than what appeared in her official records. The tattoo, the skills, the unshakable composure under pressure, all pointed to experiences that weren't reflected in her military history. What he would discover would change not only his understanding of Sarah, but the entire dynamic of the training program. The symbols on her arm weren't random decorative choices or expressions of personal philosophy. They were markers of a life lived in shadows, of sacrifices made in service to something larger than personal ambition. As the candidates settled into their bunks for their last full night of sleep before Hell Week, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling. She knew that the coming days would test her in ways the instructors couldn't imagine, but not for the reasons they thought. The physical challenges she could handle. The sleep deprivation and constant pressure were familiar companions from another life. Her real challenge would be maintaining her cover, keeping the truth about her background hidden while demonstrating enough capability to succeed in the program. The balance was delicate, requiring her to excel without revealing the full extent of her abilities or the source of her experience. The tattoo on her arm seemed to pulse in the dim light filtering through the barracks windows, each symbol a reminder of roads traveled and prices paid long before she'd ever heard of Navy SEAL training. Soon, others would begin to understand what those symbols really meant, and when they did, everything would change. Hell Week began at sunset on a cold Sunday evening with the sound of machine gun fire and explosions echoing across the training compound. Instructors in full combat gear stormed through the barracks, shouting orders and demanding immediate compliance as disoriented candidates scrambled to respond. This was the infamous start of the most challenging 5.5 days in military training, designed to push human endurance to its absolute limits. Sarah moved through the chaos with practiced calm, her muscle memory responding to the simulated combat environment, while other candidates stumbled through the confusion. She had been awakened by similar sounds before, though under circumstances far more deadly than this training exercise. The familiarity was both a blessing and a curse, helping her navigate the immediate challenges while threatening to trigger memories she preferred to keep buried. "Move, move, move," screamed Chief Rodriguez as candidates rushed to form up on the beach. "Your vacation is over. For the next 5 days, you belong to us." The temperature had dropped significantly with the setting sun, and the Pacific Ocean waves crashed against the shore with unusual force due to a developing storm system offshore. These conditions would only add to the misery that awaited the remaining 43 candidates who had survived the preliminary weeks of training. Jake Morrison found himself struggling immediately as the instructors began the first evolution, a series of calisthenics performed in the surf while fully clothed. The shock of the cold water took his breath away, and he fought to maintain composure as waves crashed over the formation. Beside him, Sarah executed each movement with mechanical precision, seemingly unaffected by the temperature or the instructor's psychological pressure. How was she not shivering? Morrison thought as he watched Sarah maintain perfect form during push-ups while waves washed over her back. It's got to be 50 degrees in this water. What Morrison didn't know was that Sarah had endured far worse conditions during her previous life. Mountain operations in Afghanistan, where temperatures dropped well below freezing. Desert missions where 100-degree heat tested human limits in different ways. The controlled misery of Hell Week was intense, but manageable compared to situations where failure meant death, rather than simply washing out of a training program. As the night progressed, candidates were subjected to continuous physical activity without rest. Log carries, boat races, obstacle course runs, and countless calisthenics designed to exhaust their bodies while the instructors worked on breaking their minds. Sleep was forbidden, and any candidate who showed signs of nodding off was immediately subjected to additional physical punishment. Tommy Walsh, who had begun to view Sarah as something of a good luck charm after she'd helped him through earlier training, found himself struggling to keep up during a particularly brutal session of bear crawls across the beach. His arms trembled with exhaustion, and he could feel his resolve beginning to weaken. "Can't do it," he gasped as he collapsed face first into the sand. "I'm done." Several instructors immediately descended on Walsh, screaming at him to continue, while other candidates were forced to maintain their positions. This was the psychological warfare component of Hell Week, using peer pressure and group punishment to break individual will. Sarah continued her bear crawl until she was alongside Walsh, then stopped and locked eyes with him. "You can do this," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the instructor's shouting. "Look at me. You can do this." Something in her tone, a certainty that went beyond mere encouragement, gave Walsh the strength to push himself back up and continue. Instructor Peterson noticed the exchange and made a mental note. Leadership under extreme stress was one of the qualities they looked for in potential SEALs, and Sarah was demonstrating it naturally. By the second day, nearly a dozen candidates had wrung out, unable to continue under the relentless pressure. Those who remained were pushed even harder, subjected to training evolutions that seemed designed to break both body and spirit. The boat crews, teams of 6 candidates responsible for carrying heavy inflatable boats everywhere they went, became crucibles of teamwork and endurance. Sarah's boat crew had started with 6 members, but was down to 5 after one candidate quit during the first night. This meant additional weight for each remaining member, but Sarah adapted without complaint. During boat races across the bay, she took on extra responsibility, helping to coordinate her crew's paddling rhythm and encouraging the weaker members when they began to falter. "She's like a machine," observed candidate Davis, a former college football player who was struggling with the mental aspects of the training despite his physical advantages. "Never complains, never seems tired, just keeps going." Master Chief Sullivan watched the boat races from a pier overlooking the bay, noting which candidates stepped up under pressure and which ones began to crack. Sarah's performance was remarkable not just for her individual capabilities, but for how she elevated her entire team. Her boat crew was consistently finishing in the top 3 despite having fewer members than the others. "Rodriguez," Sullivan called to his chief instructor. "What's the story on Shun? Her performance is off the charts." Rodriguez joined Sullivan at the pier rail, watching as Sarah's boat crew completed another strong finish. "I've been thinking the same thing, Master Chief. There's something different about her. The way she handles stress, her tactical awareness, even the way she moves. It's like she's done this before." "Run a deeper background check," Sullivan ordered. "There's more to her story than what's in her file." Meanwhile, the psychological pressure continued to mount. Candidates were deprived of sleep for days at a time, subjected to medical checks that revealed dangerous levels of exhaustion and hypothermia, yet expected to continue performing complex tasks that required mental acuity. Many began to hallucinate from sleep deprivation, seeing things that weren't there or becoming disoriented about their location. Sarah showed signs of fatigue like everyone else, but her mental clarity remained sharp even as her body approached its limits. During navigation exercises conducted while exhausted and hypothermic, she consistently plotted accurate courses while other candidates made errors that would have been fatal in real-world situations. The instructors began to take notice of more than just her endurance. During tactical exercises, Sarah demonstrated an understanding of small unit operations that went far beyond what should have been possible based on her training record. She anticipated threats, positioned herself advantageously, and made decisions under pressure that suggested extensive experience with real combat situations. Where did you learn to read terrain like that? Instructor Williams asked after Sarah had successfully identified the best approach route during a reconnaissance exercise. I pay attention to details, Sarah replied, which was true but incomplete. She had learned to read terrain during operations in some of the most dangerous places on Earth, where missing subtle indicators could result in walking into an ambush. By the third day of Hell Week, the class had been reduced to 28 candidates. Those who remained were operating on fumes, their bodies pushed beyond normal human limits while their minds struggled to maintain focus. The instructors showed no mercy, increasing the intensity of training as the week progressed. It was during an underwater exercise that Sarah's background began to reveal itself more clearly. The evolution required candidates to swim underwater distances while wearing full gear, a test of both physical capability and mental composure. Several candidates panicked when they realized how far they had to swim, their body's natural survival instincts overriding their determination to succeed. Sarah approached the exercise with the same calm intensity she brought to everything else, but this time her performance was extraordinary even by her own high standards. She moved through the water with an efficiency that spoke of extensive underwater training, covering distances that left even the instructors impressed. Her breath control and swimming technique were flawless, suggesting thousands of hours of practice in similar conditions. "Jesus," whispered Instructor Martinez as he watched Sarah complete the exercise with time to spare. "She swims like she was born in the water." What the instructors didn't know was that Sarah had indeed spent countless hours underwater, but not in training pools. She had conducted real-world operations requiring extended underwater infiltration, missions where detection meant capture or death. The controlled environment of the training evolution felt almost relaxing compared to swimming through enemy-controlled waters while carrying live ammunition and explosives. Jake Morrison, who had managed to survive the first 3 days despite his earlier doubts, watched Sarah's performance with a mixture of awe and suspicion. His own struggles with the underwater exercises made her apparent ease even more remarkable. "There's something not right about her," he confided to another candidate during a brief break between evolutions. "Nobody learns to do what she's doing from basic military training. She's hiding something." Morrison's suspicions were not entirely misplaced, though his assumptions about what Sarah might be hiding were far from accurate. He imagined steroid use or some form of cheating, unable to conceive that someone with Sarah's apparent background could possess such advanced capabilities legitimately. The truth was becoming harder for Sarah to conceal as the training progressed. Each exercise that played to her hidden strengths risked revealing more than she intended, but underperforming was not an option. She had worked too hard to get to this point to hold back now, even if it meant raising questions about her past. During a night navigation exercise conducted in complete darkness, Sarah led her team through complex terrain with a confidence that impressed even the night vision-equipped instructors following their progress. She moved through the darkness as if she could see, avoiding obstacles and maintaining perfect direction without the aid of artificial light. "How does she do it?" wondered candidate Peters, stumbling along behind Sarah as she guided the team toward their objective. "It's like she has cat eyes or something." Sarah's night vision capabilities were indeed exceptional, honed during years of operations where artificial light could mean instant death. She had learned to read darkness like others read books, interpreting shadows and subtle variations in ambient light to navigate complex environments. The training exercise felt like a casual evening walk compared to moving through hostile territory where enemies with night vision equipment hunted for intruders. Master Chief Sullivan observed the exercise from the command post, watching thermal images of the various teams as they attempted to navigate to their objectives. Sarah's team was far ahead of the others, moving with a precision and speed that seemed almost supernatural in the difficult conditions. "Pull her file again," Sullivan ordered Rodriguez. "I want to know everything about Chen's background, including sealed records if we can access them. Something about her doesn't add up." Rodriguez nodded, though he suspected they were about to uncover information that would change everything about how they viewed their star candidate. The skills Sarah was displaying were not the product of standard military training or exceptional natural ability. They were the result of experiences that few people could claim and fewer would choose to discuss. As Hell Week entered its fourth day, the remaining candidates were pushed to the absolute edge of human endurance. Sleep deprivation had reached dangerous levels, and several candidates required medical attention for hypothermia and exhaustion. Yet the training continued, each evolution designed to test different aspects of the candidate's capabilities while maintaining constant pressure on their physical and mental resources. Sarah's performance remained consistently exceptional, but the sustained effort was beginning to show cracks in her carefully maintained cover. Instructors noticed small details that didn't fit the narrative of a standard military candidate seeking to become a SEAL. The way she checked corners during building clearing exercises, her immediate recognition of different types of equipment, her instinctive responses to simulated combat situations. The fourth night brought the most challenging evolution yet, a complex mission requiring teams to infiltrate a mock enemy compound, gather intelligence, and extract without being detected. The exercise was designed to test every skill the candidates had learned while operating under extreme fatigue and stress. Sarah's team approached their target with a level of tactical sophistication that surprised the evaluating instructors. She positioned team members to maximize their effectiveness while minimizing their exposure, identified the most vulnerable approach routes, and coordinated their movements with precision that seemed impossible given their exhausted state. "She's running that team like she's done it 100 times before," observed Instructor Davis through his night vision scope. "Look at how she's positioning them. That's not something you learn in a classroom." The successful completion of the infiltration exercise marked a turning point in how the instructors viewed Sarah. Her capabilities could no longer be explained by natural talent or exceptional preparation. The skills she was demonstrating required years of real-world experience in situations where mistakes had consequences far beyond failing a training exercise. As the final day of Hell Week dawned, 21 candidates remained from the original class. They had survived 5 days of constant physical activity, sleep deprivation, hypothermia, and psychological pressure that pushed human endurance to its limits. But for Sarah, the greatest challenges still lay ahead, as her true background was about to be revealed in ways she had never anticipated. The final day of Hell Week arrived with an unusual tension in the air. Master Chief Sullivan had spent the early morning hours reviewing classified files that had arrived overnight, information that painted a very different picture of Sarah Chun than what appeared in her standard military records. As he read through the documents, his expression shifted from curiosity to amazement to something approaching disbelief. The files revealed that Sarah Chun was not simply another sailor seeking to become a Navy SEAL. She was, in fact, a decorated veteran of the most classified special operations in recent military history. Her official record had been sanitized to protect ongoing operations and the identities of other personnel, but the complete truth was far more remarkable than anything Sullivan had imagined. Sarah had been recruited at age 16 for a highly classified program that identified individuals with exceptional potential for special operations. The program, known only by its code designation, had taken her from her grandmother's modest home in San Francisco and transformed her into one of the most capable operators in the intelligence community. Her apparent military service record was actually a cover story, maintained to protect her real work. For 8 years, Sarah had operated in the deepest shadows of America's secret wars. She had conducted operations in places that officially didn't exist, against enemies whose names would never appear in any public record. The tattoo on her arm, which had drawn so much speculation from other candidates, was actually a memorial to teammates who had died during those operations, each symbol representing a fallen comrade whose sacrifice would never be publicly acknowledged. The skills that had impressed the SEAL instructors were not the result of natural talent or exceptional training, though she possessed both in abundance. They were the product of real-world experience in situations where failure meant death, not just for her, but for the innocent people whose lives depended on the success of her missions. Sullivan closed the file and sat back in his chair, processing the implications of what he had learned. Sarah Chun was not a candidate seeking to become a special operator. She was already one of the most experienced special operators in the military, someone whose capabilities far exceeded those of most of the instructors at the training center. Her presence in the SEAL program was part of a larger plan, one that went far beyond individual career aspirations. Meanwhile, the final evolutions of Hell Week continued on the beach below Sullivan's office. The 21 remaining candidates were being pushed through their last challenges, their exhausted bodies and minds tested one final time before they would be allowed to rest. Sarah moved through the exercises with the same steady competence she had demonstrated throughout the week, but those who knew what to look for could see signs of her true capabilities. Jake Morrison, who had managed to survive the week despite his early doubts, found himself paired with Sarah for a buddy carry exercise. As he struggled to lift her onto his shoulders, he was surprised by how efficiently she positioned herself to make the carry easier. "Thanks," he gasped as they began moving down the beach. "How did you know to do that?" "Just makes sense," Sarah replied, though the truth was that she had been carried by teammates and carried others during real combat operations where such efficiency could mean the difference between escape and capture. When it came time for Morrison to be carried, Sarah lifted him with an ease that defied her smaller stature. She had learned long ago how to maximize her physical capabilities, using leverage and technique to overcome disadvantages in size and strength. Morrison found the experience almost comfortable, noting how smoothly Sarah moved despite carrying his full weight. "You're strong," he said as they completed the exercise. "Strong enough," Sarah replied with a slight smile that Morrison found oddly reassuring. Instructor Peterson had been watching the buddy carry exercise with particular interest, noting how naturally Sarah adapted to the physical challenges. Her body mechanics were perfect, suggesting extensive experience with similar activities under real-world conditions. Combined with her performance throughout the week, it painted a picture of someone with far more background than her official record indicated. "Master Chief wants to see you after the final evolution," Peterson told Sarah as the candidates prepared for their last challenge. Sarah nodded without showing any emotion, though she suspected what the meeting might entail. She had known from the beginning that her exceptional performance would eventually raise questions, but the mission parameters required her to complete the training program regardless of the attention it drew. The final evolution was a simple ceremony marking the end of Hell Week for those who had survived. The 21 remaining candidates stood in formation on the beach as their instructors congratulated them on their achievement. Many were emotional, overcome by the realization that they had survived one of the most challenging experiences in military training. Sarah felt a quiet satisfaction, but no overwhelming emotion. Hell Week had been difficult, but it was not the most challenging experience of her career. That distinction belonged to operations that would remain classified for decades, missions where she had faced odds far worse than anything the training center could simulate. "Congratulations to all of you," Master Chief Sullivan addressed the formation. "You have proven that you have the physical and mental capability to continue in this program. But remember, this is just the beginning. The challenges ahead will test you in ways that Hell Week could not." As the ceremony concluded and candidates were dismissed for their first real rest in 6 days, Sarah reported to Sullivan's office as instructed. She found the Master Chief waiting for her with a thick file folder on his desk, its contents clearly visible through the open cover. "Please sit down, Petty Officer Chun," Sullivan said, his tone formal but not unfriendly. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about why you're really here." Sarah took the offered seat and waited for Sullivan to continue. She had been through similar conversations before, moments when her cover required adjustment or when operational parameters changed based on new intelligence. "I've been reading some very interesting information about your background," Sullivan continued, gesturing to the file. "Information that explains quite a lot about your performance this week." I'm not sure what you mean, Master Chief, Sarah replied, maintaining the cover story that had served her for months. Sullivan leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. According to these files, you've already completed more special operations missions than most SEALs will see in their entire careers. The question is, what are you really doing in my training program? Sarah considered her response carefully. The mission briefing had prepared her for this possibility, but the specific approach would depend on Sullivan's security clearance and his role in the larger operation. I'm here to become a Navy SEAL, Master Chief, she said simply. No, Sujivan replied firmly. You're here because someone with considerable authority wants you in this program for reasons that go beyond individual career advancement. I've been in special operations for 25 years, and I know an operational insertion when I see one. Sarah realized that Sullivan's clearance level was higher than she had initially assumed, which meant she could be more direct about certain aspects of her situation. The mission parameters require me to complete this training program, she admitted. But my goal of becoming a SEAL is genuine. I want to be part of a team again. Sullivan studied her for a long moment before responding. The team you lost, the ones represented by those symbols on your arm, they were your unit? Sarah nodded, surprised by how much Sullivan had been able to deduce from the limited information available to him. We worked together for 3 years. They were family. And now you're looking for a new family, Sullivan said with understanding. One that operates in the light instead of the shadows. Something like that, Sarah agreed. Sullivan closed the file and leaned back in his chair. Here's what's going to happen. Your secret is safe with me and with any instructor who needs to know. But I'm not going to make this program easier for you because of your background. If anything, I'm going to expect more from you than the other candidates. I wouldn't want it any other way, Master Chief. Good, because starting next week, the Real training begins. Hell Week was just about physical and mental toughness. Now we start teaching you how to be a SEAL, and I suspect that will present challenges even for someone with your experience. Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving at the training center. I'm looking forward to it. As she left Sullivan's office and headed to the barracks for some much-needed rest, Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The constant vigilance required to maintain her cover had been exhausting in its own way, and the partial revelation of her background felt like a relief. Back in the barracks, the other candidates were celebrating their survival of Hell Week with quiet satisfaction. Most were too exhausted for major celebrations, but there was a sense of accomplishment that permeated the room. They had proven to themselves that they could endure far more than they had believed possible. Jake Morrison approached Sarah as she prepared her gear for the next phase of training. His attitude toward her had changed significantly during Hell Week, evolving from skepticism to respect as he witnessed her consistent performance under extreme pressure. Hey Chun, he said quietly, I wanted to thank you for helping me get through some of the rough spots this week. I don't think I would have made it without your encouragement. We all helped each other, Sarah replied. That's what teammates do. Morrison nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. Can I ask you something? Where did you learn to do all the things you did this week? The swimming, the navigation, the tactical stuff? Sarah looked at him for a moment, considering how much she could reveal without compromising operational security. I had some good instructors along the way, she said finally. It was a true statement, though it hardly captured the reality of her training under some of the most experienced special operations personnel in the world. Her instructors have been legends in the special operations community, people whose names were known only to a select few, but whose influence shaped how America's most sensitive missions were conducted. Well, whoever they were, they did a hell of a job, Morrison said with genuine admiration. As the candidates settled in for their first full night of sleep in almost a week, Sarah lay awake thinking about the conversation with Master Chief Sullivan and what it meant for the next phase of her mission. The partial revelation of her background would change the dynamics of her training experience, but it also opened up possibilities that hadn't existed before. She had come to the SEAL program seeking more than just a new assignment. She was looking for redemption, for a chance to honor the memory of her fallen teammates by continuing to serve in a way that mattered. The shadows had been her world for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to operate in the light, to be part of an organization whose existence was publicly acknowledged and whose mission was understood by those they served. The tattoo on her arm seemed to pulse in the darkness, each symbol a reminder of prices paid and sacrifices made by people who would never receive public recognition for their service. Their missions had been successful, their contributions significant, but their stories would remain classified long after their deaths. Sarah had survived when others hadn't, carrying with her the responsibility of ensuring that their sacrifices meant something. Completing SEAL training was not just about personal achievement. It was about continuing the mission in a new form, finding a way to serve that honored both her past and her future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the training program shifted from purely physical and mental conditioning to the technical skills that made SEALs unique among Special Operations Forces. Sarah knew that her background would be both an advantage and a potential complication, as instructors who now knew something of her true capabilities would expect exceptional performance. She was ready for that challenge, just as she had been ready for every mission that had come before. The difference now was that she was no longer operating alone in the shadows. She was part of a team again, working toward a common goal with people who shared her commitment to excellence and service. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was a road that led toward the light rather than deeper into darkness. For someone who had spent years in the shadows, that direction felt like coming home. 3 weeks after Hell Week, the SEAL training program had shifted into its technical phase, focusing on the specialized skills that distinguish Navy SEALs from other military units. The remaining 19 candidates, reduced from 21 after 2 more dropouts, found themselves immersed in weapons training, demolitions, medical instruction, and advanced tactical procedures that would define their capabilities as special operators. Sarah approached each new area of instruction with the same focused intensity that had carried her through the earlier phases of training, but now she faced a different challenge. Master Chief Sullivan and several instructors knew enough about her background to expect exceptional performance, while her fellow candidates remained unaware of her true experience level. Balancing these expectations while maintaining team cohesion required careful navigation. During advanced weapons training, Sarah's exceptional marksmanship skills became even more apparent as the exercises grew more complex. The course progressed from basic accuracy to combat shooting scenarios that required split-second decision-making under stress. While other candidates struggled to adapt to the new requirements, Sarah moved through the exercises with fluid precision that impressed even the veteran instructors. Outstanding shooting, Chun, commented Instructor Williams after Sarah had completed a particularly challenging course of fire that required engaging multiple targets while moving through complex terrain. Where did you develop that level of proficiency? Lots of practice, sir, Sarah replied, which was accurate if dramatically understated. Her training had included some of the most advanced marksmanship instruction available anywhere in the world, conducted by specialists whose skills were legendary within the special operations community. Jake Morrison watched Sarah's performance with growing amazement and, increasingly, concern. Her capabilities were so far beyond what he considered normal that he was beginning to suspect she might be some kind of test or evaluation inserted into their class by the instructors. Nobody shoots like that without serious training, he confided to Tommy Walsh during a break between exercises. I'm starting to think she's not really a candidate. Maybe she's an instructor or something, evaluating how we perform. Walsh shook his head. She went through Hell Week just like we did. I was there when she was struggling in the surf, dealing with the same hypothermia and exhaustion as everyone else. But look at her now, Morrison insisted. She's making shots that most of our instructors couldn't make consistently. That doesn't happen overnight. What Morrison couldn't know was that Sarah's shooting skills had been developed during operations where missing a target could result in innocent civilians being killed or captured. She had learned marksmanship not as an abstract skill, but as a life-saving necessity, practiced under conditions where the margin for error was measured in lives rather than points on a target. The demolitions phase of training presented new challenges as candidates learned to use explosives for both construction and destruction purposes. The instruction covered basic principles of explosive materials, safe handling procedures, and tactical applications that SEALs might encounter during actual operations. Sarah found this training both familiar and nostalgic, reminding her of missions where precise explosive placement had meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. She had worked with some of the most advanced explosive devices in the American arsenal, often in situations where improvisation and creativity were as important as technical knowledge. During a practical exercise requiring candidates to breach a concrete wall using shaped charges, Sarah's approach drew immediate attention from the instructing staff. While other candidates struggled with the complex calculations required to determine proper charge placement and explosive quantities, Sarah completed her preparations with efficiency that suggested extensive prior experience. Interesting technique, Chen observed Chief Petty Officer Martinez as he examined Sarah's charge placement. That's a very sophisticated approach for someone learning this material for the first time. I paid attention during the lecture, Chief, Sarah replied, though her charge placement reflected years of practical experience with similar challenges in real-world environments. When the charges detonated, Sarah's breach was textbook perfect, creating a clean opening exactly where intended with no wasted explosive material or structural damage beyond the target area. Several other candidates' attempts either failed to penetrate the wall completely or created breaches that would have been tactically useless in real operations. "How did you know exactly how much explosive to use?" asked candidate Davis, who had used too much material and created a breach large enough for a truck to drive through. "Math," Sarah answered simply. "The calculations aren't that complicated if you pay attention to the variables." Master Chief Sullivan observed the demolitions training from a distance, noting how naturally Sarah approached problems that challenged the other candidates. Her solutions were consistently elegant and efficient, reflecting an understanding of explosive principles that went far beyond what could be learned from classroom instruction alone. During medical training, Sarah's performance reached levels that bordered on the spectacular. The curriculum covered combat medicine, trauma treatment, and emergency procedures that SEALs might need to perform in the field when professional medical support was unavailable. While other candidates struggled to master basic trauma treatment procedures, Sarah demonstrated medical skills that surprised even the Navy corpsmen serving as instructors. Her knowledge of anatomy, wound treatment, and emergency procedures was extensive and precise, reflecting training that went far beyond standard military first aid courses. "Chun, have you had formal medical training?" asked Hospital Corpsman First Class Rodriguez after watching Sarah successfully perform a complex trauma procedure on a training mannequin. "Some field training, but nothing formal," Sarah replied, technically accurate since her medical instruction had been conducted by military specialists rather than civilian institutions. The truth was that Sarah's medical training had been comprehensive and intensive, focused on keeping teammates alive in environments where evacuation might be impossible for extended periods. She had treated real wounds under combat conditions, performing procedures that most trained paramedics never encountered. During a scenario-based exercise simulating battlefield trauma treatment, Sarah's performance was so skilled that the instructors temporarily stopped the exercise to ensure she was following proper procedures. Her treatment of simulated wounds was faster and more effective than techniques being demonstrated by the instructor staff. "Outstanding work," commented the lead medical instructor. "Have you considered switching to the hospital corpsman rating? Your aptitude for medical work is exceptional." Sarah smiled politely, but declined the suggestion. Her path led toward a different kind of service, one that would allow her to honor her fallen teammates while contributing to missions that could make a real difference in the world. As training progressed into more advanced tactical procedures, Sarah's background became increasingly difficult to conceal. The instruction covered small unit tactics, reconnaissance techniques, and mission planning procedures that SEALs used during actual operations. These were areas where Sarah's experience was most extensive and most relevant to her current training. During a tactical planning exercise, Sarah was assigned as team leader for a simulated reconnaissance mission. The scenario required her to develop a plan for gathering intelligence on an enemy facility while avoiding detection and ensuring successful extraction of her team. Sarah approached the planning process with systematic thoroughness that impressed the evaluating instructors. She identified potential threats, developed contingency plans for various scenarios, and coordinated team movements with precision that reflected extensive experience with real-world mission planning. "Your plan is extremely well developed," commented Master Chief Sullivan during the planning review. "You've considered variables that most candidates miss entirely." "The details matter," Sarah replied. "Small oversights can become big problems during execution." Sullivan nodded, recognizing the voice of someone who had learned that lesson through experience rather than instruction. The planning sophistication Sarah demonstrated was typically developed only after years of actual operational experience. When the team executed Sarah's plan during the field exercise, their performance was flawless. They approached the target undetected, gathered the required intelligence, and extracted without being discovered by the opposing force. The exercise controllers rated their mission as completely successful, noting that Sarah's leadership and planning had been key factors in the positive outcome. "How did you know to approach from that direction?" asked candidate Peters after the exercise. The instructor said later that it was the only route that would have worked. "Terrain analysis," Sarah answered. "Look at the ground, understand what the defenders can see, find the blind spots." What she didn't explain was that she had learned terrain analysis during operations where such skills meant the difference between successful mission completion and walking into enemy ambushes. She had spent years studying ground from the perspective of both attacker and defender, learning to identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited tactically. Jake Morrison found himself increasingly convinced that Sarah was not who she claimed to be. Her performance across all areas of training was so consistently exceptional that it seemed impossible for someone with her supposed background. "I'm telling you, there's something not right about her," he insisted during a late-night conversation with several other candidates. "Nobody is that good at everything unless they've done it before." "Maybe she's just naturally talented," suggested Walsh, who had become one of Sarah's strongest supporters within the class. "This isn't natural talent," Morrison replied firmly. "This is experience. Real experience with the stuff they're teaching us." Morrison's suspicions were not entirely wrong, though his assumptions about what Sarah might be hiding were still far from accurate. He suspected some form of deception or unfair advantage, unable to imagine that someone with Sarah's background could legitimately be participating in the training program. The truth was more complex than Morrison could have guessed. Sarah's presence in the SEAL program was indeed part of a larger plan, but not one designed to give her unfair advantages. Instead, it was part of a transition process, moving her from the shadows of classified operations into the more visible world of conventional special operations. During a particularly challenging navigation exercise conducted in mountainous terrain, Sarah's performance reached levels that could no longer be explained by natural ability or exceptional preparation. The exercise required teams to navigate through complex terrain using only map and compass, reaching specific checkpoints while avoiding detection by opposing forces. Sarah led her team through the mountains with confidence that bordered on supernatural, navigating through darkness and difficult terrain as if she had traveled the routes many times before. Her pace was steady and efficient, never hesitating at decision points or backtracking due to navigation errors. "How does she know exactly where to go?" wondered candidate Rodriguez as Sarah led them unerringly toward their objective. "We haven't even stopped to check the map in over an hour." "She reads terrain like a book," replied Walsh, who had come to trust Sarah's navigation abilities completely. The truth was that Sarah had conducted similar operations in far more challenging environments, often in hostile territory where navigation errors could result in capture or death. Mountain navigation through friendly territory felt almost relaxing compared to moving through enemy-controlled areas while avoiding trained hunters. When Sarah's team reached their final checkpoint hours ahead of schedule, having successfully avoided all detection points along their route. The exercise controllers initially suspected they had taken unauthorized shortcuts or received outside assistance. "Explain your route selection," demanded the controller after reviewing their checkpoint times. The controller studied her explanation carefully, then nodded with obvious respect. "Outstanding navigation and tactical awareness. Your route was actually more efficient than the one we expected most teams to use." Master Chief Sullivan, who had been monitoring the exercise remotely, made a note in Sarah's file. Her performance was consistently exceptional across all areas of training, but her navigation and tactical skills were particularly noteworthy. These were capabilities that couldn't be faked or learned quickly, reflecting deep understanding gained through extensive practical experience. As the technical phase of training neared its conclusion, Sarah found herself facing a different kind of challenge. Her exceptional performance had earned the respect of instructors and fellow candidates alike, but it had also created expectations that would be difficult to maintain during the final phases of the program. More importantly, her success was bringing her closer to a goal that meant more to her than individual achievement. Completing SEAL training would represent not just personal accomplishment, but a transition from one form of service to another, from operations conducted in darkness to missions carried out in the light. The tattoo on her arm had become a source of quiet pride rather than speculation among her fellow candidates. They might not understand its true significance, but they had come to recognize that it represented something important to someone they had learned to trust and respect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the program moved toward its final phase, testing not just individual capabilities, but team cohesion and leadership under the most demanding conditions the training center could create. For Sarah, these challenges would represent the last obstacles between her current identity and the future she had chosen to embrace. The final phase of SEAL training arrived with an unexpected crisis that would test everything Sarah had worked to achieve. 3 days before graduation, intelligence reports indicated that a terrorist cell had taken hostages at a remote facility, creating a situation that required immediate response from available special operations personnel. Due to operational demands elsewhere, the only qualified team immediately available was still in training at the Naval Special Warfare Center. Master Chief Sullivan received the mission briefing in his office, while Sarah and the other remaining 17 candidates prepared for their final evaluation exercises. The situation was complex and dangerous, requiring the kind of precision and expertise that typically took years to develop. Yet circumstances had created a scenario where partially trained candidates might be called upon to execute a real-world mission. "This is unprecedented," Sullivan told Commander Harrison, the officer in charge of the training program. "These candidates haven't completed certification. They're not qualified for operational deployment." "One of them is," Harrison replied, placing a classified folder on Sullivan's desk. "Chun has more operational experience than most of our graduate SEALs. She's been cleared for emergency deployment if circumstances require it." Sullivan opened the folder and read the authorization documents, each bearing signatures that indicated the highest levels of military authority. Sarah's background clearances went far beyond what he had previously been shown, revealing operational records that would remain classified for decades. The mission parameters allow for using partially trained personnel under her leadership, Harrison continued. "If we can't get another team to the location in time, she's authorized to lead a rescue operation using available candidates." Outside Sullivan's office, Sarah was conducting a final equipment inspection with her fellow candidates, unaware that her past was about to intersect with their present in ways none of them could have anticipated. The candidates had bonded into a cohesive unit during months of shared hardship, developing the kind of trust that allowed them to function effectively under extreme pressure. Jake Morrison approached Sarah with a question about equipment configuration, his attitude toward her having evolved completely from his initial skepticism. "Chun, can you check my gear setup? I want to make sure everything's positioned correctly for the final exercise." Sarah examined his equipment arrangement with the same attention to detail she brought to everything else, making small adjustments that would improve his efficiency and comfort during extended operations. Her teammates had come to value her input on technical matters, recognizing that she possessed insights that complemented their formal instruction. "Looking good," she told Morrison. "Remember to keep your medical kit easily accessible. You never know when you might need to use it quickly." Morrison nodded, grateful for the advice and the mentorship Sarah had provided throughout their training. He had learned to trust her judgment completely, even if he still wondered about the source of her exceptional capabilities. Tommy Walsh joined them, carrying news from the instructor's staff that would change everything. "Word is they're calling off the final exercise. Something's come up that requires immediate attention from the training staff." Before anyone could respond, Chief Rodriguez appeared at the entrance to their preparation area. "Chun, report to Master Chief Sullivan's office immediately. Full gear, ready for immediate deployment." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her stomach, the sensation that preceded mission briefings that would take her into dangerous situations. She gathered her equipment with practiced efficiency while her fellow candidates watched with confusion and concern. "What's happening?" asked Candidate Davis, voicing the question they were all thinking. "Probably just a final evaluation," Sarah replied, though her instincts told her otherwise. The urgency in Rodriguez's voice suggested something more serious than routine training activities. Sarah reported to Sullivan's office to find him waiting with Commander Harrison and several officers she didn't recognize. The presence of senior leadership and the formal atmosphere indicated that this meeting was about more than training requirements. "Sit down, Chun," Harrison said, his tone serious but not unfriendly. "We need to discuss your real qualifications and a situation that requires your immediate attention." Harrison outlined the hostage situation while Sarah listened with professional focus, mentally cataloging the tactical challenges and resource requirements the mission would present. The facility location, terrorist capabilities, hostage count, and time constraints all factored into her analysis of possible approaches. "The nearest qualified team is 18 hours away," Harrison continued. "But we have authorization to deploy you immediately with selected candidates under your operational command." Sarah considered the implications carefully. Leading partially trained personnel into a live hostage rescue operation violated standard procedures and created risks that extended far beyond her own safety. Yet the alternative was allowing innocent people to die while waiting for conventional resources to become available. "What's the command structure?" Sarah asked, accepting the mission, but needing clarification about operational parameters. "You'll have full tactical command," Sullivan replied. "Your candidates will be briefed on your actual background and qualifications. They need to understand that this is a real operation with your authority clearly established." Sarah nodded, already beginning to plan personnel selection and mission approach strategies. She would need candidates with specific skill sets for different aspects of the operation, balancing technical capabilities with psychological readiness for live combat. "I'll need Morrison, Walsh, Davis, Peters, and Rodriguez," Sarah said after mental review of each candidate's strengths and capabilities. "They've shown the best combination of tactical skills and stress management during training." "Granted," Harrison replied. "Brief them on operational requirements, but maintain classification security regarding your background details." Sarah returned to the candidate area to find her classmates waiting anxiously for information about the sudden change in schedule. Their concern was evident, but so was their trust in her leadership and their readiness to follow her guidance. "We've been selected for a special operation," Sarah announced, her tone shifting to the command presence she had developed during years of leading combat missions. "This is not a training exercise. Lives are at stake, and success depends on our ability to function as a team under extreme pressure." The selected candidates gathered around Sarah as she outlined the mission parameters they were authorized to know. A terrorist cell had taken civilian hostages and was threatening to execute them unless their demands were met. Time was critical, and they represented the only immediately available response capability. Chun will be in operational command, Rodriguez added, emphasizing the authority structure that would govern their mission. Her orders are absolute and immediate. Questions about why come after we've completed the mission successfully. Jake Morrison felt his worldview shifting as he processed this information. The woman he had initially dismissed as unqualified was now being placed in command of a real special operations mission involving people whose lives depended on their success. How do we know she's qualified to lead this kind of operation? Morrison asked, voicing the concern he felt was shared by others. Master Chief Sullivan stepped forward to address the question directly. Because Petty Officer Chun has more experience with hostage rescue operations than anyone else available. Trust me when I tell you that following her leadership is your best chance of bringing everyone home alive. Sarah appreciated Sullivan's support while recognizing the delicate balance required to establish authority without revealing classified details about her background. Her fellow candidates needed confidence in her leadership, but couldn't be given information that would compromise operational security. The plan is straightforward, Sarah began, outlining the tactical approach she had developed based on intelligence reports and facility layout information. We'll approach in 2 teams, with primary focus on locating and securing the hostages while secondary team neutralizes the terrorist threats. Her briefing was comprehensive and professional, covering contingency plans, communication protocols, and individual responsibilities for each team member. The candidates listened with growing respect as they recognized the sophistication and thoroughness of her planning. Tommy Walsh, who had learned to trust Sarah's judgment completely during training, spoke for the group. We're with you, Chun. Just tell us what you need us to do. The helicopter flight to the target location gave Sarah time to observe her team's psychological readiness for their first real combat operation. Each candidate processed the transition from training to actual mission differently, but all showed determination to perform well under her leadership. Remember your training, Sarah told them over the helicopter's communication system. Trust your skills, trust each other, and follow the plan. We've prepared for this even if we didn't know it at the time. Morrison found himself drawing strength from Sarah's calm confidence, recognizing that her composure under pressure was not just exceptional training, but the product of real experience in similar situations. His doubts about her qualifications had evaporated completely. The target facility was exactly as described in the intelligence briefing, a remote compound where terrorists had seized control and barricaded themselves with their hostages. Sarah conducted a final reconnaissance from the helicopter before committing to their planned approach. Primary team with me, Sarah ordered as they prepared to fast rope from the helicopter. Secondary team, establish overwatch and await my signal for coordinated assault. The insertion went flawlessly, each candidate executing the techniques they had learned during training while adapting to the reality of live operations. Sarah moved through the facility with practiced efficiency, her team following her lead as they navigated toward the hostage location. Contact with the terrorists came sooner than expected when Morrison's team encountered a sentry who had been positioned to watch for approaching rescue forces. The engagement was brief and decisive, with training taking over as adrenaline surged through inexperienced systems. First contact complete, Morrison reported over their radio system. 1 Tango down, continuing to objective. Sarah's team reached the hostage location simultaneously, finding 12 civilians being held in conditions that confirmed the intelligence reports. The hostages were frightened but unharmed, though several showed signs of stress and dehydration from their captivity. Hostages secure, Sarah reported to the command element overhead. Beginning extraction procedures. The coordinated assault on remaining terrorist positions went exactly as planned, with each team member performing their assigned roles with precision that impressed even Sarah. Their training had prepared them well for the technical challenges, while their trust in her leadership provided the confidence necessary for successful execution. Within 45 minutes of insertion, all hostages had been secured and extracted to safety while the terrorist threat had been completely neutralized. No friendly casualties were sustained during the operation, and collateral damage was minimal despite the complex tactical environment. As their helicopter lifted off from the target area with rescued hostages aboard, Sarah felt a satisfaction that went beyond successful mission completion. Her team had performed exceptionally under real-world pressure, validating both their training and her confidence in their capabilities. Outstanding work, everyone, Sarah told her team over the communication system. You performed like seasoned professionals. Back at the training center, news of the successful operation spread quickly through the instructor staff and remaining candidates. The mission had demonstrated not only Sarah's exceptional qualifications, but also the effectiveness of the training program in preparing capable special operators. Master Chief Sullivan greeted the returning team with obvious pride and relief. Textbook operation, he told Sarah privately. Your leadership and their performance were exactly what the situation required. Jake Morrison approached Sarah after the briefing, his respect and admiration evident in his expression. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I doubted your qualifications from the beginning, but you just led us through a perfect mission. Thank you for bringing us all home. We brought each other home, Sarah replied. That's what teammates do. 3 days later, the 17 remaining candidates stood in formation for their graduation ceremony from basic underwater demolition SEAL training. They had completed one of the most challenging programs in military service, earning the right to wear the SEAL trident that symbolized their capabilities and commitment. But for Sarah and her team, the ceremony represented more than individual achievement. They had proven themselves under real-world conditions, validating their training through successful completion of an actual special operations mission. As Master Chief Sullivan pinned the SEAL trident to Sarah's uniform, he spoke quietly, so only she could hear. Your teammates would be proud, he said, referring to the memorial symbols tattooed on her arm. I hope so, Sarah replied, feeling the weight of transition from her past life to this new chapter of service. The tattoo that had drawn so much speculation during her early days at the training center was now understood by her classmates as something significant and meaningful, even if they didn't know the specific details. They had learned to respect Sarah, not just for her exceptional capabilities, but for the quiet strength and integrity she brought to everything she did. After graduation, Sarah's new assignment would take her to a SEAL team where she could continue serving while maintaining the cover identity that protected her classified background. She would be able to operate in the light rather than shadows, part of a team whose existence was publicly acknowledged and whose mission was understood by those they served. The journey from her grandmother's home in San Francisco to the Naval Special Warfare Center had taken her through experiences that few people could imagine, much less survive. She had lost teammates who meant everything to her, operated in environments where mistakes were measured in lives rather than points, and carried responsibilities that would remain classified long after she was gone. But now she had found a new team, people who shared her commitment to service and excellence. The symbols on her arm would always remind her of those who didn't make it home, but they would also represent the foundation for whatever came next. As she stood with her new teammates, Sarah Chun felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt like she belonged somewhere again, part of something larger than individual achievement or personal ambition. The shadows would always be part of her story, but they no longer defined her entire existence. The road ahead would bring new challenges and opportunities, new missions that would test her skills and commitment in different ways. But whatever came next, she would face it as part of a team, surrounded by people who understood the meaning of service and sacrifice. For someone who had given so much in darkness, the chance to serve in the light felt like coming home.